Everyone in the room laughed when she stepped up to the board. Dressed in a faded green sari with worn-out slippers, Sita held the chalk like it might break in her fingers. The lecture hall was full, not with students, but with silence waiting to explode into mockery. "Madam Cleaner," one boy smirked, nudging his friend. "Do you even know what calculus is?" She didn't answer. She simply looked at the equation written on the board. It was complicated, a second-order differential equation, intentionally chosen to humiliate. The professor had challenged the class with it earlier that day. No one could solve it, not even the top students. It was left unsolved. Until now, everyone assumed she was there to wipe the board. Just clean and go. But Sita, the woman who mopped the university's floors for the past 8 years, didn't bring a rag. She brought silence. And now she was about to break it. Whispers filled the room. Is she serious? Someone record this. Even the professor leaned forward with a mix of amusement and curiosity. Sita stared at the equation. And then, slowly, she began writing. One symbol, then another. Her hand didn't tremble. Her eyes didn't blink. And as the chalk danced under her fingers, the laughter started to fade, replaced by wide eyes, dropped jaws, and the sound of hearts skipping beats. No one knew her story. No one asked why a woman who cleaned toilets could differentiate like a scholar. But as she reached the final line, and the chalk stopped, even the professor stood up. He walked toward the board. Read every step. His lips parted. And then came the words no one expected. This is correct. The silence cracked. But her mystery had just begun. The room that once echoed with ridicule now buzzed with disbelief. Phones that had begun recording to capture a joke were now holding the birth of a mystery. Students who had laughed now leaned in, hoping they hadn't missed the moment she began. The exact point where simplicity met brilliance. The professor, Dr. Arjun Mehra, turned to her. Who taught you this?" Sita stood quietly, her hands now faintly dusted with chalk instead of detergent. Her expression was unreadable, not pride, not defiance, just stillness, like a mountain that didn't care whether people praised or mocked it. She looked at Dr. Mehra, and for a moment he saw it. A flicker, a storm behind her eyes that had been caged for too long. "I just remembered," she said softly. "Remembered what?" A girl blurted out from the front row. The whole class turned toward her, but the girl didn't flinch. She was Mira, a top student, and the only one who hadn't laughed when Sita approached the board. Her eyes weren't filled with mockery. They were lit with hunger, not for fame or drama, but for the truth. Sita glanced down. Her voice, still calm, floated back into the stunned silence. "I used to be someone else." The professor stepped forward, cautiously, as if approaching a wild creature that had just spoken. "You mean you studied this somewhere before?" Sita nodded. "Long ago." "How long?" She looked up, then gave a half-smile. "Before I had to hide my books in a rice sack so they wouldn't get wet when it rained through the holes in our roof." The class went silent again. No one had expected this, not even Sita. But once the words started, they carried a river behind them. A river of years, losses, and memories damned for too long. "I was the only girl in my village who passed the intermediate board with distinction," she said. "They said I was going to become someone important. Maybe a teacher. Maybe a professor." "Then?" Mira asked. Sita's eyes didn't flinch. "Then my father died. My mother fell sick. I had 3 younger siblings. And dreams, unlike mouths, don't need feeding." Dr. Mehra lowered his gaze. "And this?" he asked, gently pointing to the board. "I used to solve problems like this by the lantern's light. When the power would go out, I'd keep going. Because equations didn't shout at me or ask for dowry or tell me I was wasting my time. They just sat there, waiting to be solved." The room felt heavier now. Sita looked around, not with arrogance, but with quiet command. "You all thought I was just a maid, and I am. I sweep your halls. I mop your floors. But I also remember Euler's identity and how to solve Laplace transforms and how this," she pointed to the final answer on the board, is just the language I never got to keep speaking. She didn't realize when Mira had stood up and started clapping. Then another student joined. Then another. Soon, the room thundered, but it wasn't laughter anymore. It was applause. Loud, raw, and echoing with respect. Dr. Mera raised his hand, and the room slowly fell silent. I want to offer you something, Sita, he said. Not because of today's shock, but because of the years you were denied. Would you consider auditing my classes? No fee. Just come, sit, learn. Like you were always meant to. Sita blinked, once, twice, then shook her head gently. I can't stop working, she said. My job keeps my family alive. The professor nodded thoughtfully. Then let the university pay you to study. A part-time staff scholar program. We'll create one if we have to. You deserve that much. A murmur rippled through the class. Not in protest, but in agreement. Sita stood there, rooted. Not out of doubt, but from years of never being offered a hand. When one finally came, she didn't know how to hold it. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Mira said softly, walking up to her. We'll help. I'll help. The bell rang for the next class, but no one moved. This moment was bigger than schedules. That night, as Sita walked home through narrow streets and smoky alleyways, her mind raced faster than her feet. The chalk dust still clung to her fingers, like the memory of a door creaking open after decades of being sealed. Her home was modest. 2 rooms, a low tin roof, and a threadbare curtain separating the kitchen from where they all slept. Her youngest brother, now 16, was revising biology under a flickering bulb. You're late, he said. Food's cold. Sita smiled and ruffled his hair. I solved something today, she said. He grunted. Again? Another broken tap. No, she said quietly. This time it was an equation. He turned to look at her. What? I'll tell you after dinner. She didn't eat much that night. Not because the food wasn't enough, but because something fuller had taken root inside her. Hope. The next few weeks were strange. Every morning, she still wore the same uniform, still clocked in at 6 a.m., and still cleaned the same staircases. But now students greeted her, some with shy nods, others with curious smiles. By 10 a.m., she'd slip into a seat at the back of the calculus class. Notebook open, eyes alert. She didn't ask questions. She just listened, absorbed, remembered. By the 3rd week, even the top students had started seeking her help after class. Mira became a regular companion, sharing notes, bringing her tea, and sometimes just sitting with her during breaks. You think it's weird, Sita said one day. Learning this late in life? Mira shook her head. I think it's beautiful and rare. One afternoon after class, Dr. Mera pulled Sita aside. There's a regional mathematics Olympiad happening next month, he said. I know you're not a formal student, but I've spoken to the board. You're eligible if you're willing. Sita blinked. What if I lose? He smiled. Then you lose as someone who dared to enter, not someone who never tried. She didn't answer right away. But that night, after cleaning the staff room and locking up, she stood in front of the empty whiteboard again. She picked up a marker and wrote, One day, I will teach from this board. Then she erased it, not because she doubted it, but because she knew she didn't need to write it to believe it. The calendar on the university notice board marked the date in red, Regional Math Olympiad, April 20th. For most students, it was just another academic milestone. But for Sita, it was a mountain she'd been secretly climbing for years. Barefoot, in the dark, with no applause waiting at the top. Every evening after her shift, she studied. Mira would stay back to quiz her, often sneaking snacks from the canteen. Dr. Mera would give her problem sets beyond the curriculum, Olympiad-level logic puzzles, abstract algebra, integral series that curled like twisted vines. And yet, something sat heavy in Sita's chest. Doubt came not from the math, but from memories. One night, while revising under a yellow bulb in her cramped kitchen, Sita paused over an integration problem. Suddenly, the numbers blurred. She dropped her pen, leaned back, and closed her eyes. The memory hit her like a wave. She was 19 again. Back then, she had qualified for a national-level scholarship exam. Her photo had come in the local newspaper. Her math teacher cried when she received the selection letter. But the night before she was supposed to leave for the city, a knock came at the door. It was her uncle. Her mother had collapsed. Kidney failure. Immediate hospitalization. The trip was canceled. The money saved for the ticket went toward medicines. The letter, once framed on the wall, was burned when she couldn't go. "I'll study next year," she had told herself. There was no next year. Now, decades later, the same feeling clawed at her again. The fear that something would come, again, and snatch this from her. But this time she wasn't alone. "You're overthinking it," Mira said during lunch break. "No," Sita whispered. "I'm remembering. You've earned this moment. Let yourself step into it." Sita looked away. "What if people laugh again?" Mira smiled gently. "Then let them. You've already taught them once. Maybe this time, they'll listen better." As the days passed, word about the made mathematician began to spread beyond the campus. A local news outlet published a piece titled "From Mop to Math," the story of Sita Devi. It went viral overnight. Some praised her, some mocked her, but everyone knew her name now. Her son, who had once avoided talking about her work at school, now showed the article to his friends with pride. "That's my mom," he'd say. "She cleans the university by day and solves calculus by night." The day of the competition arrived. Sita stood outside the exam hall, wearing her best sari, the same one she had worn to her sister's wedding years ago. Mira had ironed it for her that morning. The pattern was simple, but she wore it like armor. The hall was filled with students, bright, confident, most of them half her age. She sat in the back row. Some stared. Some smiled politely. A few sneered. One boy muttered, "She's here to clean up the exam sheets?" Sita ignored it. When the papers were distributed, she didn't rush. She read each question like it was a friend she hadn't seen in years. First problem: solve a recursive series. Second: prove an identity using induction. Third: a multivariable limit approaching an undefined surface. She felt something stir inside her. Not anxiety, but joy. The kind of joy that only comes when your soul recognizes its native language. Hours passed. When the invigilator collected her sheet, she handed it over without a word. The final question, an unsolved pattern theory puzzle, had taken her almost 40 minutes. She wasn't sure about it, but she smiled, because for once, she didn't feel like a cleaner pretending to be a student. She felt like a mathematician. 3 days later, the results were posted online. Mira barged into the janitor's supply room, panting, phone in hand. "You did it." Sita looked up, wiping sweat from her forehead. "What?" "You ranked third out of over 700 students across the district." Sita froze. She took the phone with shaking hands. There it was, her name. Rank 3. Sita Devi. Independent entry. She blinked twice, thinking it was a mistake. But the truth settled in like warm light through a window. She had won. Not just the rank, but the right to believe again. Later that evening, the university held a small felicitation. The dean handed her a bouquet. Students clapped. Dr. Mehra gave a speech. But the best moment came quietly. A small girl, no older than 12, approached her after the event. She wore a school uniform and held a crumpled notebook. "Dee, she said shyly, "I want to be like you." Sita knelt down. "Then promise me one thing." The girl nodded. "Never let the world tell you who you are before you decide it for yourself." That night, as Sita locked the empty classrooms and switched off the corridor lights, she paused at the whiteboard. She picked up a marker and wrote again. This time, she didn't erase it. "The equation of life is solved step by step. I'm just on step 3. Success, like a sudden light in a dark room, reveals more than it comforts." In the days following the competition, Sita's life shifted. Not drastically, but in quiet, almost imperceptible ways. Some students stopped seeing her as invisible. Some teachers began nodding at her with respect. Even the university's vice-chancellor invited her for tea, praising her unwavering spirit. But Sita noticed something else too. The stares. The whispers behind half-shut doors. She's not even enrolled. Must have cheated. What's next? The maid teaches the professors. She didn't respond. She had already learned that mockery comes in two shapes. Loud and cruel or quiet and jealous. She had faced both before. But this time she wasn't alone. Your win made us all proud, Dr. Mara said one afternoon. But it also stirred discomfort. Some staff feel challenged. Sita sat across from him in the faculty lounge. Her hands clutched the edge of her sari tightly. Did I do something wrong? No, he said firmly. But the truth is, your story threatens a system that's built on keeping people in boxes. You broke out of yours. She stayed silent for a moment. Then maybe I should have stayed in it. No, Mira said, walking in with 2 cups of chai. You didn't climb out of that box just for yourself. You showed people like us that it's possible. You can't dim that light now. The university offered her an official position, mathematics assistant, research trainee, under Dr. Mara. She'd help correct papers, organize academic resources, and assist in the upcoming inter-college quiz tournament. The salary wasn't huge, but it was enough for her to finally quit cleaning. It took her 3 days to accept. Not because she doubted the work, but because she had grown to respect cleaning as the job that kept her family fed when dreams failed. On her last day with the janitorial crew, she folded her uniform slowly, wrapped it in paper, and placed it inside her cupboard. Not with shame, but with reverence. It wasn't just a uniform. It was proof. Proof that dignity didn't come from job titles. Came from effort. But as her academic role began, so did the resistance. At a faculty meeting, one professor scoffed. Why is she sitting here? This is for degree holders. Dr. Mara's voice was calm but sharp. She ranked higher than 3 of your students in the Olympiad. If we measure by skill, she more than qualifies. But whispers spread. Some staff avoided her. One even refused to share a desk. The head of administration, Mr. Sanyal, called her in privately. Look, Sita, he began, adjusting his glasses. Your story is moving, but we're running an institution. You don't have a degree. Technically, you're not eligible for any teaching track. Sita listened quietly. So I suggest you stay in this assistant role. Don't aim for more. It'll only invite problems. She thanked him and walked out, her jaw tight. Later that evening, she sat under a banyan tree on campus, notebook in lap, unshed tears in her eyes. Mira found her there. Hey, she said softly. Bad day. Sita didn't answer. Mira sat beside her and placed a hand on her shoulder. You don't have to fight every battle alone, you know? I'm not scared of fighting, Sita whispered. I'm scared of being stopped right when I started. The next morning, something unexpected happened. The Department of Mathematics, Delhi University, had picked up her Olympiad story. They offered her a scholarship for a distance learning B.Sc. mathematics program, fast-tracked because of her performance and recommendation letters from Dr. Mara. The email subject line read, Opportunity knows no uniform. Sita stared at the screen for several seconds. Mira screamed when she read it. You're going to be a college student. Officially. Dr. Mara clapped her on the back. It begins again, Sita. This time with open doors. But not all doors stayed open. A few nights later, Sita's brother came home with bruises on his arm. What happened? She demanded. He hesitated. Some boys from the neighborhood. They said I'm acting rich now. Said my sister's trying to become a teacher. Acting big. Sita's heart sank. They hit you. Just shoved me. I'm fine. She said nothing, but that night she didn't sleep. Because success had drawn light, yes. But it had also drawn shadows. A week later, she visited her old school. The one that had shut down due to lack of funds. She walked through cracked corridors and rusting gates. The place where her first dreams had been born. She met the old guard still sweeping the yard. They come back to haunt you too, don't they? He said with a smile. Not haunt, she replied. Remind. That night, Sita made a decision. If the system wouldn't let her rise quietly, she would rise loudly. Not for applause, but for every girl who thought brilliance belonged to someone with perfect English, expensive books, or polished shoes. She enrolled in the degree program, balanced her university job, cared for her siblings, and studied late into the night. One morning, a notice appeared on the campus board. State math debate, open to research trainees. Dr. Mara nudged her. This time, don't hesitate. She nodded, because this time the battlefield wasn't just numbers. It was voice. She would have to speak, debate, defend her logic in front of judges. And for someone used to being invisible, standing up wasn't just difficult, it was terrifying. But she remembered something Mira once said. You didn't come this far just to be quiet again. The auditorium smelled of polish, paper, and pressure. Wooden chairs lined up in neat rows. Name tags sat on tables, bearing the institutions they represented. IIT Delhi, NIT Patna, University of Lucknow, and then, independent entry Sita Devi. It was her first official debate. No calculator, no pen, just her voice and her logic. She sat quietly in the waiting area, sari neatly pinned, a plain leather notebook on her lap. Her fingers trembled slightly, not with fear, but with weight. The weight of expectation. The weight of every person who still whispered, she's just a maid pretending to be smart. Dr. Mara leaned in. They'll test more than your knowledge today. Stay calm. I'm not scared, Sita said softly. I know, he smiled. You've walked through fires hotter than this. The topic flashed on the projector. Mathematics as a universal language? Elitist tool or equalizer? Her eyes narrowed. A ripple went through the crowd. It was philosophical, layered, and deeply personal for someone like her. Participants would speak for or against, and then defend their points under questioning. Sita was the fifth speaker. Her opponent? A confident-looking boy from IIT Delhi with a crisp British accent and a half-smirk when he saw her badge. He went first. Math, he said, pacing smoothly, is like any other high-level language, beautiful but inaccessible to the poor. You need elite institutions, top-tier training, and exposure to really master it. The audience nodded. He had rhythm, charm, and a punchline. Let's not pretend numbers don't discriminate. They do, depending on who's allowed to touch them. Polite applause. Then, it was Sita's turn. She stood, adjusted the microphone, paused. I don't have an accent, she began. But I have an answer. Silence. I learned my first math formula while cleaning chalk off a blackboard. I solved my first integral while my hands smelled of detergent. And I found the beauty of prime numbers sitting under a flickering bulb after cooking dinner for my siblings. She glanced at her opponent. So no, math is not an elitist tool. Society is. The numbers never turned me away. People did. A soft murmur swept through the hall. Math is not owned by universities, she continued. It exists in the rhythm of sewing machines, in the balance of grocery ledgers, in the hands of mothers dividing rotis equally among children. Her voice grew stronger. Don't blame math for your gates. Blame your gatekeepers. And with that, she sat down. The auditorium was still. Then applause. Real applause. Not polite, not obligatory. Earned. The judges fired questions. She responded with clarity and precision. She quoted Euler and Ramanujan. She explained mathematical philosophy with analogies so human, even non-math students leaned in. At one point, one of the judges, a stern woman from an international research council, asked, "What do you want from all this, Sita?" Sita didn't blink. "A key," she said, "so I can open doors for others like me." She didn't win first place. She won the audience award. And when she walked off stage, the boy from IIT approached her. "You killed it," he said with a sheepish grin. "I underestimated you." Sita smiled. People often do. That night, back in her small kitchen, Sita reheated leftover dal and sat with her notebook. On the front page, she wrote, Dreams written in dust still count, if you never stop writing. Just then, her brother entered, waving a brown envelope. Sis, something from Delhi. She opened it. Invitation to speak International Women in STEM Summit. All expenses paid. Mira shrieked from the other room. You're going global. But Sita just laughed. A soft, tired, proud laugh. Because the girl who once cleaned university floors was now being flown to represent it. The International Women in STEM Summit was being held in New York City. A city that had always seemed like a distant dream, now unfolding in front of her like an invitation to the future. Sita stood in front of a tall mirror in her small apartment, adjusting the new suit Mira had insisted she buy. The colors were muted, but the fabric felt unfamiliar against her skin. She hadn't realized it until now, but she was nervous. Not about the summit, not about the stage or the judges or the questions, but about the truth that was following her every step. The truth was that success had come at a cost. When she stepped off the plane in New York, she was greeted by a professional team, media personnel, and a schedule packed with interviews. A camera crew followed her as she entered the conference hall. Her badge read, Sita Devi, Global STEM Advocate. And yet, despite all the acclaim, all the accolades, there was still a voice in her head that asked, is this who I really am? She had never set out for the title. She didn't need the applause. She just needed the space to exist without limits. And now she had it. But what would she do with it? The summit itself was overwhelming. A sea of women from all corners of the globe, all with their own stories of struggle and triumph. And yet, when Sita stood before them to speak, her voice wasn't just one among many. It carried the weight of the unheard. She shared her journey, but more importantly, she shared the reason why she had fought so hard to be here. To prove that math wasn't a privilege reserved for a select few. To prove that no matter who you were, where you came from, or what you did, you had the right to explore, to question, to create. The room was silent. For the first time, she realized it wasn't just about numbers. It was about access. It was about opportunity. After her talk, a woman approached her. Her name was Amara, an educator from Nigeria. You have no idea what your words mean, she said, her eyes welling with tears. I've been fighting to get girls into STEM fields in rural Nigeria for years. And here you show them it's possible. Sita smiled, her heart swelling. Then let's keep showing them. Together. The evening gala was held in an upscale venue, glittering with elegance. Sita stood at the edge of the ballroom, quietly observing the sea of people in evening gowns and tuxedos. They were all brilliant, successful women, but their worlds were different from hers. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Mira. Sis, they're all talking about you here. Don't forget your roots. You've made it, but don't let anyone make you forget who you are. You're not just Sita Devi, the mathematician. You're the one who still washes dishes with a smile. Sita looked around at the glittering world she now found herself in. She didn't belong to this world. But maybe that was the point. Later that night, she received a call from her brother. Guess what? He said, excitement in his voice. I just got accepted into the local university. She froze. Really? Yep, I'm studying physics. I want to be like you. Tears welled in her eyes. You're going to be better than me, she whispered. As the night wound down, Sita found herself alone in the quiet balcony overlooking the skyline. The city buzzed below her. She had made it. But as she looked out, her heart settled on one truth. Success wasn't the destination. It was the journey, and the people you brought with you. A few weeks later, back home, Sita launched an initiative called Math for All, a scholarship program for underprivileged children who showed promise in math and science. The goal was simple, to give every child the opportunity she had fought for, without the limitations of their background. She funded the program herself, with the money earned from her speaking engagements and book deal. Her first Math for All class was held in a community center, and as she watched the children scribbling equations on chalkboards, she felt something deep inside her settle. She wasn't just a mathematician anymore. She was a bridge for those who had been left behind, a bridge for the silent voices, the ones who had always dreamed but couldn't be heard. In her final speech at the summit, Sita said, "The greatest equation in life is not solved by numbers. It's solved by people. The ones who lift each other up. The ones who never stop believing in the possibility of change." Epilogue. Years later, when Sita looked back at her journey, it wasn't the medals or the titles that stood out. It was the countless letters she received from young girls, women, and even older mothers who told her, "I started because of you," and that, Sita realized, was her true success. Her math problems had been solved, but her life's equation was just beginning. The end.